Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, ad nastana. As always, it's a pleasure to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio. Let me ask you something. Hasn't this been an interesting year so far? We're over halfway through the year already, and I don't know about you, but I'm learning so much as I go along. The ground that we've covered here, the different fraternal organizations that we have fellowshipped with and investigated, and as well as revisited. And let's not forget that I do try to revisit these organizations that we cover here, because I do believe it's important to keep them in the public consciousness, right? But, you know, it's as part of my continuing effort to investigate the past in order to move forward with fraternalism, I'm once again bringing you a segment on defunct fraternal orders. And in this particular segment, we will be investigating the Knights of Labor. Now, this organization had a much larger impact than many people are aware of. Now, just to give you some insight, the Knights of Labor, or K of L, as they were, or as again they were officially known, the Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor, was an American labor federation that was active in the late 19th century, and particularly in the 1880s. It operated in the United States as well as in Great Britain and Australia. I bet you never heard of them before, right? But as I said, as we move forward into this segment, you're going to see that they had a much larger impact than most people are aware of. I can't wait to get started here. But as I always ask you, are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? Then you just trim your lamp and follow me. By 1896, the adult male population in the United States was roughly 19 million. At the time, every fifth or possibly every eighth man you met identified with some fraternal organization or another. Okay. But the collapse of the National Labor Union in 1873 had left a large number of workers looking for an organization. And into this void stepped the Knights of Labor. The Noble Order of the Knights of Labor was founded by Uriah Smith Stevens, James L. Wright, and a small group of Philadelphia tailors on December 28th, 1869. Uriah Stevens was an American labor leader and tailor. At their inception, the Knights of Labor functioned as a secret society. They practiced Masonic ritual complete with grips and passwords. The Knights used secrecy and deception to help prevent employers from firing their members. Now, the Knights of Labor helped bring together many different types of people from all different walks of life. For example, Catholic and Protestant Irish-born workers were members of the Knights of Labor. The Knights of Labor attracted, as I said, many Catholics, and perhaps at one point, Irish Catholics were the majority of their membership. And a possible reason for this was that Powderly was a Catholic. However, the Knights' use of secrecy in Masonic-style rituals during its early years concerned many Catholic bishops. This would lead many bishops and dioceses to denounce the Knights of Labor. The Knights of Labor, here's an example of how they used secrecy. The Knights of Labor chalked announcements of their meetings in code on public walls and slowly moved in on the spaces left by the wreckage of the trade unions in the Depression of the 1870s. Now, the Knights of Labor gained better organization and national vision in 1879 when they replaced Stevens with a labor leader named Terence V. Powderly. Mr. Powderly was only 30 years old at the time. Now, the Knights of Labor was a diverse industrial union open to all workers, and they became popular with trade unions and Pennsylvania coal miners during the economic depression of the mid-1870s, and grew rapidly. Powderly and the other leaders felt that it was best to have a versatile membership base in order to get points of view from all aspects of labor. Now, in order to help the workers gain an organizational identity, the Knights of Labor barred membership from bankers, land speculators, lawyers, liquor dealers, and gamblers. Its members consisted of low-skilled workers such as railroad workers, immigrants, and steel workers. As one of the largest labor organizations in the 19th century, the Knights wanted to classify the workers because this was a time of industrial expansion in the United States of America. As their membership expanded, the Knights began to function more as a labor union and less as a secret organization. In 1882, the Knights of Labor ended their membership rituals and removed the words "Noble Order" from their name. Now, though the Knights of Labor were initially reluctant to participate in support strikes to advance their goals, they did aid a number of strikes and boycotts. The Wabash Railway strike in 1885 saw Powderly finally adapt and support the eventual successful strike against Wabash Line after a carpenter and Knights of Labor member named C.A. Hall was fired for attending a labor meeting in February of that year. The strike gave momentum to the Knights and their membership, and it surged. By 1886, the Knights had more than 700,000 members in the United States. The Knights' primary labor demand was the 8-hour workday. They also called for legislation to end child and convict labor, as well as a graduated income tax. The Knights also supported and created hundreds of co-ops as part of their plan to gradually replace capitalist exploitation with cooperative commonwealth. When the Knights of Labor expanded their membership base into Canada in 1881, they played a key role in the development of the working class consciousness in Canada. They were also an important player in the development of the Trades and Labor Congress in Canada. The Knights had an estimated 12,000 to 14,000 Canadian members between 1886 and 1888. After a trip to the United States during the heyday of the Knights, social activist and daughter of Karl Marx, Eleanor Marx, was so moved that she urged the British workers to follow the American example and form a labor party. Isn't that interesting? Eventually spreading outside the US, the Knights claimed as many as 50,000 members in Belgium in the 1880s and 90s, and upwards of 20,000 in Britain and Ireland, 10,000 in New Zealand, and thousands more that we know of in France, Italy, Australia, and South Africa. By 1886, the Knights of Labor boasted nearly 1 million members worldwide. Isn't that amazing? Right? Their members were men and women. They were black, they were white, they were working in all branches of labor, from wage labor, coal mines to textile mills and sugar plantations. But in 1886, right after the Knights of Labor's peak, they began losing more members to the American Federation of Labor. The Knights of Labor's fall is believed to have been partly due to their lack of adaptability and beliefs in old-style industrial capitalism. Another large reason for the decline was the tension between skilled craftsmen and unskilled workers. Now, that's kind of like you see in today's world, right? Where sometimes members of the trades, shall we say, in the working world don't really like to be in the same union as, shall we say, assembly line workers and so on. But the Knights' decline can also be explained by several other factors. First of all, eventually the American movement could no longer manage its level of growth. In Canada, the movement wasn't really uniform. While numbers in Ontario were drying up at the end of the 1880s, they remained particularly high in Quebec. For instance, in 1901, more than half of the remaining 24 assemblies were located in Montreal and Quebec City. That's rather interesting, isn't it? The Knights also fell victim to the success, as I said, of the American Federation of Labor, which wanted to federate all the craft unions in the United States. The struggle also pushed the Canadian Knights of Labor to reclaim their autonomy and compete with the American Federation on nationalist foundations. The Knights' nationalist views, and this is very interesting, left their mark and would later lead to a rise in French Canadian and Quebecois trade unionism. So there you have it, brothers and sisters, the Knights of Labor. What did you learn here? Well, this was a group, and as you heard me say at the beginning of this segment, this was a group that had unparalleled expansion, worldwide expansion. Some of the other groups that the defunct fraternal orders that you saw me feature here on Points of Light Radio before have really only existed within North America. And even in some cases, they didn't expand all across the United States and didn't expand all the way into Canada. But this group went worldwide, right? Belgium, Europe, United Kingdom. Amazing, isn't it? That their expansion, right? And the influence that they had. I mean, you didn't know that Karl Marx's daughter actually was influenced by the Knights of Labor. That's interesting. That's part of the history. And another thing is, another great example is here in Canada, the Knights' nationalist views left their mark and would later lead to the rise of French Canadian and Quebecois unionism. That is something. They really did have tremendous amount of influence in the history. And you've often heard me say that here on Points of Light Radio, right? You've also saw that at a time when lodges were largely male only and racially segregated, this was an organization that admitted both men, women, and people of color, right? They all mixed in these lodges. That's an incredible, right? This organization was ahead of its time. And as I said, they really did seem to leave their mark on our society, right? Now, and I also want to ask, you get tired of hearing me ask this, but could the cessation of their rituals, degrees, and secret work in 1882 have contributed to their demise, right? Is it possible that they would still exist today in at least a fraternal form had they not done that? Something to think about, right? Like in my research, I was able to read some of their ritual work, which I'll include here in the details section of this segment. The degrees and rituals were quite elaborate and would have been worth preserving, right? And as I always ask you in these kind of cases, would you be interested in somehow resurrecting this fraternal order? If so, reach out to me, right? But I do hope you enjoyed this, as I really do enjoy bringing you this segment. Like I said, this is an historical organization. It really is. I think you'll agree with me, right? And as I keep saying, in order to move forward in fraternalism, we need to remember the past, don't we? Right? I'll leave it there. But before I go, as usual, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input, especially on a segment like this one. This is going to be interesting to see what your comments are like. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, it's been an honor and a pleasure bringing you this segment. And until we meet again, just step